I'm sorry to say that we in the modern world, we don't always have the most healthy relationship with our bodies. We see many social indicators of this fact. And if we look at other societies, we see indicators that this does not have to be the case. If we look within our own experience, we also, many of us, see that this is a situation, a significant situation. We often experience a challenge to maintain a healthy and positive relationship with our bodies. It's very important for us to have a practice that proves that that does not have to be the case. If we have another option, then we'll take it. So often, though, we don't seem to have another option. And this can result in a negative descent, a vicious spiral. I know for me, at one point, I was very upset with my body, didn't like it very much, and so I ate less, so I felt worse. And those negative feelings I associated naturally with my body, because my body is what was feeling those negative feelings, which made me even more frustrated with my irritating body. And there we are, in a spiral. A spiral can be very damaging. Partially because I wasn't eating enough, I was actually losing weight, but also because when I did eat, it was in unhealthy ways. Binging, and binging in particular on food that wasn't nutritious. And psychologically unhealthy, because even that then seemed shameful, so that I did in private. And so there was shame involved, and there was lack of nutrition involved, and there was an underlying dissatisfaction with having a body. And all of that all those points fed into each other, and it was a very difficult situation to work through. So here we are. We have these bodies. Here they are. And it's important for us to try to find a method, a clear method that improves our relationship with our bodies, partially because it helps us to overcome negative behaviors, but also because why not? Why shouldn't we be happy? Why shouldn't we tune in to the capacity of this miraculous structure to experience pleasure? Why shouldn't we be happy? And here we are. We have a body that knows how to be happy, that actually knows how to be happy in very diverse circumstances. It's amazing. Have the capacity for pleasure. Why shouldn't we take advantage of that? So we find a method. We find a method in order to gradually tune in to the pleasure that we feel. And we can feel pleasure for all kinds of reasons. You can feel pleasure because of a physical event, a hug, or eating a meal. We can feel pleasure because of an emotional event. We feel proud of ourselves. We are with a friend. We can feel pleasure for, as I like to say, no good reason. You just sit down and relax. No good reason, as I like to say. You could just as well call it a great reason, of course, but I like the no good reason, because that way I don't have to justify it. I don't have to come up with some glib depiction of why it's reasonable for me to be happy now. I don't need a reason. I'm going to be happy for no reason right now. Thank you very much. And as we come into contact, bit by bit, with pleasure in our bodies, with our bodies, as that happens, naturally, we start to enjoy having a body a little bit more. It's actually not so bad after all, this body. We start to associate our bodies with pleasure. We start to associate the bodily experience with a pleasurable experience. When we associate a body experience with a pleasurable experience, we naturally begin to have the experience of gratitude. Gratitude for our bodies, because our bodies are providing us with pleasure, which is what we want. So we start to look upon our bodies as something to be thankful for. That's a significant shift. And as we know, the forces that cause us to have an unhealthy relationship with our bodies, those forces come to a certain extent from, quote, outside. From relationships that we have, things that we've been told, advertising we've seen, and such. Naturally, that's true. It's also the case that on a day-to-day basis, a lot of the perpetuation of that relationship happens on the inside. It's something that our own thoughts perpetuate. And it turns out that it's not so easy for many of us to shift those thinking patterns. But if we systematically, repeatedly, consistently attend to the pleasurable aspect of being alive in this body, then it happens with time. It can take some time. It's natural. About how long we've taken cultivating an unhealthy relationship, it's reasonable it would take a little bit of time to cultivate a healthy relationship. It's really not a problem. We, with time, begin to feel a sense of pleasure in being embodied and having a body. And that pleasure is very important to note. It's very, very important to note that pleasure is something we feel. Pleasure is something we feel. Notice that. If you hear someone talk about pleasure, they'll say, I feel pleasure. They don't say, I think pleasure. Notice that. We don't say, I think pleasure. We say, I feel pleasure. I'm feeling pleasure. Yesterday I felt pleasure. We talk about it that way because our bodies feel it, and because our bodies are the messenger, you could say. We for the pleasure, we start to appreciate. We're glad when that messenger comes around. Thank goodness the messenger, the pizza delivery person, is coming with the pleasure pizza. I want that pleasure pizza, so I'm happy that the pizza delivery person is coming. We know as our bodies are that pizza delivery person, but good news. It's amazing. This messenger doesn't go away. They don't go back to the pizza shop. They stay right here all the time. And it's possible, therefore, to feel a certain amount of pleasure all the time. This is actually very important, and it's possible. And when we do that, then we start to have a thankful, a grateful relationship with our bodies. And then a shift occurs that's deeper than our minds. And so naturally, because the shift has happened on a body level, our minds need to restructure in order to reflect that. So often we think our minds are in charge. Our minds have, in my personal experience, very limited power. If we feel something, soon enough we'll believe it. We'll find a way to believe it. And I'm not the only person who feels this way. There are many extensive studies that show this scientifically, and it's also reflected in what I think in our culture is considered most important, which is business development courses, becoming capable of making better business decisions. We see clearly that those decisions are typically emotional in nature, so we have to accept that fact. Our decisions begin emotional, and then the thoughts adapt to that. So if we have a felt change in our relationship with our bodies, then soon enough our thinking will change. And then that thinking won't continually pull us back into that negative spiral. So to make a statement like we can feel pleasure all the time, this is an extraordinary claim. This isn't a claim to be taken lightly. I hope no one's taking it lightly. I hope everyone's missed a few sentences at least of what I've said and your deep distrust of that statement. How could he say something like that? Say you could experience pleasure all the time. Really? Is this not just one of those ridiculous, outrageous claims that those spiritual people make in order to gain attention? Hope you've thought about that a little bit. So, some people really want to know. Some people want to know, is it really possible? Could you be in any circumstance and still experience pleasure? Really? Really? Well, good news, you can find out. You enter some training regimen in which you are systematically, carefully, and safely put into circumstances of increasing levels of pain and misery and helplessness and confusion. That's what you do. And then you find out, well, right now I'm at a pain level of around 3, and I'm confused. I don't understand why we're doing this anymore. I used to think I did, but once I got to pain level 2, I forgot that. So now I'm at a pain level 3, plus I lost my orientation in life. And am I still happy? You find out. And then, good news, the pain will drop, and you can consider, oh, I remember why I'm doing this after all. You probably, some of you have, this happens all the time. You go to the dentist, you completely forget your orientation in life, just that. So that can happen relatively easily. We lose track of what our goals are and what we believe in, and we're in a little bit of pain, and we find out, can I still experience pleasure? And then if the answer is yes, good news. We have another experiment for you to explore. So now we're going to increase the discomfort level a bit more. Plus, we're going to stop you from sleeping. How'd that go? And then you find out. There are a lot of different ways of safely increasing the amount of discomfort and confusion that a person is experiencing. And you can increase the duration of time also that the person does that. Now, are the people who do this just stupid? In general, no. In specific cases, of course, there are issues, and sometimes they're actually mental health issues. But in general, people who are doing this are trying to find out, is there a kind of pleasure that can be experienced all the time or not? Does such a thing exist? If something like that exists, that's a very significant discovery. So that's explored, and it's explored, and it's explored, and it's explored. And what's interesting is that can provide us with a deep confidence. A deep confidence. And when we have that pleasure that's connected with confidence, that is just one single step away from the courage required to live according to our conscience. This is a subtle point, but it's important to see. When we have a kind of pleasure that we know we can count on, and it gives us confidence, there's just one single step to be taken, and we're capable of living according to our conscience under all circumstances. This is highly significant. Why? Because the amount of pleasure that comes from knowingly, carefully, and consistently living according to what we know is right, that experience provides us with a kind of pleasure that is far, far greater than whatever pleasure the materialist modern world of acquisitions could provide us. And that means that we've escaped. It means we got out of the trap that gave us that helped anyway, that supported us in producing that unhealthy relationship with our bodies in the first place. If we come to the point when we can directly experience our conscience and then immediately live according to it, because we know that whatever I do, I'll still have this pleasure that I can count on. And that means that when I do the thing that I know is right, and there's resistance that comes from the world, that's okay. There's no problem. I'll still have this pleasure. The world can provide me with its appropriate punishments, at least from its perspective, and no problem. You can punish me. I'll just have this pleasure. Not a big deal. If you don't have that, then it's very difficult, because there's always the threat that's provided by systems that are able to maintain injustice. There's always the threat of, we're going to take away the source of your pleasure. We're going to remove that from you. But if those systems can't, if that threat doesn't feel particularly dangerous, then all that's left is acting according to what we know is right. And then we discover that that's all we need. It's revolutionary. This is, in my experience, the most revolutionary transition. This is how I describe it. So sometimes we do bad things, right? Sometimes we do good things. Sometimes we do things that we aren't proud of. Sometimes we do things we are proud of. Those things happen. Let's face it. We don't have to get all non-judgmental here. There's such a thing as judgment. So let's just face it. So sometimes we do bad things. Sometimes we do good things. Why do we do the bad things? I'll tell you why. Because we wanted to. That's why. That's the reason. Okay. Why did you do the good things? Well, it's simple. Because you wanted to. That's why. That's the reason. the bad thing because you wanted to, you did the good thing because you wanted to. Now, if you have the ability to experience the pleasure that's associated with doing what you know is right, and you have that ability to consistently experience that, then you can appropriately judge which of these two provides more pleasure. Doing what I know is wrong, doing what I know is right. Not following my conscience, following my conscience. Being true to myself, not being true to myself. Which of these two is more pleasurable? If we have the ability to directly experience that kind of pleasure, the kind of pleasure that grows in our bodies, matures into confidence, and then associated with our compassion for the world becomes conscience, becomes our vow. If we have that ability to experience that kind of pleasure consistently, then we're able to judge which of these two provides more pleasure. Doing what the world may want me to do, or what my selfish desires want me to do, or doing what I know I can do without regretting it later. Which of these two provides more pleasure? We get to find that out for ourselves. If there's even a bit more pleasure associated with following our conscience than not, then that's the end of this game. This game ends there. It ends. That's it. That is the end. From that point forward, we can always experience more and more pleasure. There's nothing that could ever take that away from us, because whatever the circumstance we're in, we can always do, according to our conscience, what we see is right under those circumstances. So there's an unlimited, an endless amount of pleasure that we get from where? From our bodies. There's an interesting thing that we sometimes forget. We forget that our behavior is done with our bodies. So naturally our bodies are involved in the decision about how to behave. If we have a decision-making system that is present in our bodies, then that decision-making system will certainly apply to our behavior. And so, as we often say, behavior change is the holy grail of mindfulness practice. This is the thing, this is the final judge. Is this working? For us to step by step feel our bodies, feel the relaxation in our bodies, feel the pleasure associated with that relaxation in our bodies, feel that pleasure growing in our bodies to the point when it can match and work with whatever pain, suffering, fear, anger, sadness arises, so that that pleasure matches it and balances it and integrates with it. And out of that comes a behavior associated with our conscience. If we have that, then we have the basic tools needed in order to revolutionize our lives and the lives of those we come into contact with, and therefore the world. We have that. We have that basic underlying tool, and that's a tool that we don't even need to understand, because our bodies don't understand. Our bodies live. Feel your body. Feel the pleasure, and notice the relationship between that pleasure and your conscience, your deepest vow. Make use of that to live in a way that is loving towards all living things. Thank you for being here together today.